Hey, what's going on, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy, coming at you again with another awesome episode of the Civil Engineering Academy podcast. Today, I have a special guest that I've brought on. He's actually a previous student of the course we have made called the Ultimate Civil PE Review Course at civilpereviewcourse.com. And his name is Kurt Brown, and Kurt is actually a geotechnical manager with Teradyne. And he's living in California, moved there from Florida area. So he's got a lot of experience in the geotechnical world, working with soils in Florida as well as California now. So we talk all about it in today's episode. It's fun to hear his journey to becoming a civil engineer, and has a lot of tips and pointers for those coming up into the civil engineering world. So this is going to be a good show, and it's all coming right up. Hey, all right. So I have Kurt Brown on with me. How's it going, Kurt?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. I like to hear that. Kurt's got some sweet experience, and this will be a fun interview for us. So I guess as we begin, Kurt, why don't you tell us, I guess, a little bit about yourself, how you got into engineering, what do you do?
Well, I grew up in Jamaica. And I actually started out in surveying school.
Oh, how about that?
I started at the University of the West Indies and spent about a year. And I remember surveying, they have these huge surveys that you have to do, cadastral, geodetic surveys that you go to every mountaintop and kind of try to site each location to tie everything together. And we were hiking to one of the locations, and I realized I don't think surveying's for me.
Oh, you're like
I was hiking with a machete through some mountain pass to bringing equipment like theodolite on the back and everything. And,
holy cow!
I'm like, yeah, I don't really think surveying's for me. It's always, I was always interested in the sciences. My father was a chemist, and I wanted to be a chemist, but my parents kind of nudged me in the direction of engineering. They're like, it's a good career, and
that's great.
You'll always have a job and public works and stuff like that. So
you started in surveying, and then that grew into civil engineering from there?
Yeah. I transferred to the University of South Florida in Tampa, and went to school there and did a lot of work with the concrete research lab. My actually emphasis in college is a little bit different from everybody else's. Everybody always does geotech, structural. I did construction materials.
Wow.
I worked at the construction materials lab, so we actually did FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation, research on cement and clinker.
Huh.
So that's kind of getting in the weeds when it comes to concrete and how to grind the clinker and how it affects the setting time, the durability, and how it's affected by aggressive environments. In Florida,
wow.
You have like aggressive environments. People have houses that are exposed to seawater. They get exposed to sulfates. The production of cement itself actually contributes to it not being durable sometimes, because when they burn the raw materials in the kiln, the sulfur, because we were trying to keep the air clean, gets trapped and it falls back down into the concrete, into the cement, and that sulfur later in life, when it meets with other different things, turns into aggressive crystals that cause spalling and stuff like that. So I did a whole bunch of research on that, and started working at PSI as a staff engineer, and primarily did a lot of regular concrete inspections, structural steel inspections, and what else? I'm trying to think.
For those that don't know what PSI is, what's PSI? For those that maybe not know what that is.
PSI was an engineering firm. It's called Professional Service Industries. They were one of the few national firms out there that they had branches in the East, West Coast, and the Midwest. So
Pretty big company that did testing,
yeah, that did
Geotech.
testing.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's great. So, okay. So then you're into work. Now you're working for PSI, and that's
Hmm.
in Florida.
Hmm.
And then where did you go from there?
From PSI, I ended up working for a company called MacTech.
Uh-huh.
And MacTech is very similar to PSI. It was a national firm. Did a lot of concrete material testing, and then I was kind of in charge of a group of field technicians. And from there, I actually went to work for a concrete forming contractor.
Wow.
So
Well, you got a lot of experience.
yeah, so we went to they only worked on high rises. Um,
Wow.
so I went to South Florida. We did a couple hotels there, and then the financial crisis happened.
Oh no. And that went away.
um, it went away. I remember getting laid off. Actually, most of the people in our company got laid off, and I was kind of out of work for like 3 to 6 months, I think.
Wow.
And the only work I could find was with Geico insurance.
Really?
Yeah. So I became a medical insurance adjuster for
Oh my
4.5 years.
You went from engineering to adjuster. Wow.
So the one of the things that the financial crisis did was delayed my licensing because I needed a certain amount of experience in order to apply.
Yes.
I was 6 months short of the experience I needed when I got laid off.
Oh
With
no.
the experience at Geico, they wouldn't let me take the exam, essentially.
Gosh.
So it kind of delayed that. I mean, I eventually started working for Universal Engineering after Geico, and had to actually they didn't even want to hire me as an engineer. They're like, "Oh, you've been out of it for 5 years, so
Oh
here's this field technician position."
no.
Well, I'm like, let me take this pay cut and work in the field. But honestly, I got to work on a really interesting project in St. Petersburg, Florida. They were doing an addition to the VA Mental Health Institute. They were building like a big psychiatric hospital for
Wow.
the VA, and I got to be on that project. So I worked there, and then I saw they had an opening for a staff engineer position in Fort Myers, which is 3 hours south. So
So
I,
you got back into engineering.
mm-hmm,
I think there's a lot of lessons right there that you've talked about. I think
mm-hmm,
a lot of people that might have a gap on their resume,
mm-hmm,
um, you can always, my own experience is that you can always find stuff to fill in for that gap in terms of a resume, in terms of trying to find a job. But you
mm-hmm.
also bring up another point is that you need that experience under a licensed PE in order to take the PE and and
Yep.
and receive it. So those are things that you need to consider as an engineer looking for a job in different places to make sure you can earn that PE license. So I think you got some good pointers there. So what do you do right now? Where are we at now?
Right now, I'm a branch manager for a small firm in Southern California.
Doing
So we're a
geotech work.
geotechnical firm. So
Excellent.
um, I'm involved in marketing, getting new work, writing proposals, helping kind of guide the work along. I have a small team of engineers, but that got smaller because of the
COVID.
coronavirus. Yeah.
Ugh.
So I'm kind of working with a smaller staff than I was before, and we do a lot of residential work, geotechnical soil studies, and geologic studies, and we also do material testing. Not as much, but we also do material testing.
Wow, you wear a
But
lot of hats over there. Sounds like doing a lot of
yeah,
different things.
and that's the thing about smaller firms, and I think that's why this position kind of it. I initially it looked difficult, and a lot of people probably wouldn't take it, but like it allows me to kind of get a lot of experience very quickly. It's trial by fire in a kind of a way. Like you kind of you're able to learn the marketing process and getting clients. but then you're also involved heavily in the operations and production part.
Wow.
The larger the firm that you work in, the more segmented things become, and you're like, oh, I just write section 2.1 to 3.4, and I'd give it to this guy, and he finishes the rest. But like in that, you have to make sure the product is complete. A huge thing, and I think that is not emphasized in school a lot. We probably have one class in writing, but
Yes.
engineers need to be able to write. It's the
Yep.
most important thing. And the second most important thing, and that's why I don't really regret working in at Geico, like doing customer service, is that
Oh yeah.
customer service is a huge part of being in business. So as an engineer, a lot of engineers tend to be very stoic and kind of introverted, and
Yeah.
it doesn't really sell well. So like if you notice in most engineering firms, they'll have like a team of engineers and they have to hire like a sales guy because he has to like be able to
That's
tell
very
tell
true.
tell people what to do or actually bring the work in, you know. So
Wow.
I think with my experience, like working in customer service and then having the technical background, it actually makes it easier for me to tell clients what we do, because it's like, okay, that's what you need to be able to do, because at the end of the day, you're just selling a service. I
Right.
mean, I think people get into engineering and they don't really think about what the career path is. Like,
No, yeah. Well,
this
and
is,
I think you hit on a lot of tips and tools for like the rising engineer that's still in school. Is a lot of engineers come out of school and they hated having to give the presentations or writing a paper and stuff. But the truth is, it's probably like mostly what you're doing when you're in work. Like you have
mm-hmm,
to be able to explain things with words and do a presentation that makes sense for a client to sell your services. And I totally agree with you. At the end of the day, we're providing a service to customers, whoever
mm-hmm.
that customer may be. And so having all of those soft skills, uh, whether you can take a course or practice it or whatnot, though all of those things translate very well into the civil engineering world. So
It really does.
that's good advice. Um,
Yeah, it really. I mean, those are the things that like I have a 10th grade high school grammar workbook on my computer that I review, because I have to. One of the things I have to do is to review other engineers' reports,
and
and
you're like
so
grammar.
grammar stuff like that, and like I mean, it's there's a lot of different things that goes into it. It's not just like running a calculation and moving on with it, you know.
Right.
So.
No, that's a great point. I wanted to ask you if maybe you could share a lesson learned, maybe a mistake that you've seen someone else make or that you've made yourself from a distance that you've observed. Can
Mhm.
you share what that might have been so other engineers out there listening might benefit from?
Well, like so I worked on a project once and it was in Fort Myers, and it used to be an old historic Methodist church that a developer bought and tore down.
Huh.
So people were not happy in the community about this project, and there was a developer that wanted to put in a 5-story apartment complex, and we were on site doing soil borings for this complex. So there were not necessarily not protesters, but people keep coming up to you, ask, "What are you doing? Like, why are you doing like stuff like that?" And I had a set of drillers with me that I wanted them off site as quickly as we possibly could.
Get in
So
and out.
we got down to that particular area is it's kind of an alluvial area. It's like off the Fort Myers, like off the river. Um, and I think we were at 70 feet and we were still in like just really soft silt.
Wow.
And when we bid the project, I think we had just bid it to do borings to 50 feet. And at 70 feet, I stopped. And I mean, I wrote the report, and this was back when I was primarily just writing geotechnical reports, delivered it to the client, and they were like, and it was almost like it was inconclusive because the engineer that was reviewing it, he was like, "Well, why didn't you go deeper?" I'm like, "Well, I needed to get out of sight." Well, he's like, "Well, we don't know anything about the site still. Like, where's the bearing strata? Where we're
Well,
gonna, if we're gonna put this on piles, where are we gonna put the foundation? I'm like, yeah, that's a good question, but like I need it. So I think one of the lessons and mistakes on being younger is like sometimes you get intimidated by like people and situations, but like I think when you're working on a project, you have to have clear goals and directives. Like, what am I out there to try to achieve? And it's not like, oh, I'm just out there to drill a hole in the ground. No, you're out there to find where the bearing strata is. And sometimes on site things change. And then another thing is to communicate with the client at the time. Like,
oh,
not to
that's
so
smart. Great
communicate with the client
advice.
at the time, let them know like, hey, we're out here, this is what we found. If we stop here, we're not going to really have any information. We need authorization to go further. And I mean, I think that was my mistake at the time, because I was the one that was managing that project. And I mean, eventually, we had to go out there with another drill rig, which is significant cost to remobilize and go out there. So
How deep did you have to go?
I think that we ended up finding sand at like 80 feet
Oh,
and not
you're
even
right.
rock. So
Uh,
I mean, so moving forward, and I think um, I've come across that again a couple of different times, and especially here being in Southern California, you will drive 10 miles and you'll run into completely different geology.
yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, so just communicating with the client, I think that's one of the most important thing. Clear goals and objectives, and communicating with the client.
perfect. Yeah, communication seems to be always the key. And I know as a new engineer, that's kind of hard to do because you feel like you're just going out there to do whatever you were supposed to do. But
Hmm.
if things don't make sense, start communicating with people and trying to get answers to things or authorization to move forward on things that you need. So um, I've been in those shoes before, even in my own career. So I remember designing a structure for transmission. I'm in the utility world, and I just got chewed out by the foreman because I had screwed up uh, designing this pole, and he had 40 years of experience looking at these things and could just pick things apart. So
Yeah,
you
and I
know
think,
you got to learn sometime.
yeah, I mean, and sometimes you just learn like that. I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
especially in geotechnical, because you do not know what you're running into
That's
at
very true.
all. It's a very big
What's in the
approximation.
ground?
I had a job one time where we did not do the geotechnical study. We had it from another firm, and we were doing the inspections for ground improvement. And it was supposed to be like a 6-story building. And I'm looking at this thing, and the previous geotech had only done CPT,
Hmm.
which is cone penetrometer. There's no sample recovery with that. You
Just
kind of
pushed
get,
in
they push a
soft soil.
cone, yeah, and you get like an indication of what's there. And he's like, oh, there's this hard layer right here and all this stuff. I'm like, okay. So I'm out there inspecting, and I'm like, okay, well, the hard layers are around 30 feet, so we'll probably expect to see that. We get out there with the vibro probe, and they did the first hole, and it turns out it wasn't rock. I guess 40 years ago there was a railroad
Oh
train
my God.
station there. They had buried a bunch of railway sleepers underneath the site. And what we thought was rock was really just garbage.
Oh no.
So like, of course, client is pissed.
Yeah.
It's not my fault, but at the same time they're like trying to get you to sign off on stuff. I'm like, no, you kind
We
of have to
don't
remove all this stuff or replace it.
we don't know what's in there, man. I had a similar problem. We were building a transmission line, and it was butting up against a dump site that used to be there.
Hmm.
They had covered it over now. And so we had a few borings done, and after they were done, it was like, yeah, the soil's good. They go to put in, I had designed these for vibratory caissons because the soil was really soft, and they could just
Right.
plow these in real quick, and then you could bolt your tower on top. And they get down to a certain point and they cannot get through a certain layer of soil. and no matter how hard they've been jacking this thing to get in the dirt. And they ended up having to modify that. But to this day, I don't know what is down there. When you build next to these dump sites and things where people have left stuff, things get a little unknown what's underneath the soil. So that's kind of tough. What do you think you should do when you're running into situations like that? Do you got to
there's
just dig
different
it up?
things. You can dig it up, or you could use GPR to kind of see what's down there. You're not going to see a clear picture, but if there's an obstruction, it will tell you. And then you could do like sister piles, like move to the lateral side and design like a sister pile system.
Yeah, that's
so
smart.
I mean, and there's different things that you can do. Like, I mean, this particular case, they ended up removing the upper 10 feet from the site, and we found like everything, like rebar, like masonry blocks. Yeah, so like, and that's the thing. I mean, people, and I didn't even realize this. I was talking to an engineer once, and he's like, "Oh, just go to Google Earth, go to the site, and go back in time." There's like,
use that history view.
Yeah, that history view. You could see, sometimes you will see them dumping trash there, and it's there to be seen, you know.
It's an excellent tool. Excellent tool to use. Good
you
point.
could go back even further on old aerials, but they're like in black and white and grainy, but like you can go back all the way to like the 40s, I think. But on Google, I think you can go back to like 10 years maybe.
Cool. I can't remember, but sometimes they get grainy there too, but you can still kind of see what's going on. No, that's a great tool. I think we've touched on a lot of projects that you have worked on. Have one of those been your favorite, or do you have another one in mind that might be a favorite?
Well, when I went over the questions, I saw which one. So there was one project I worked on completely. Like, it was a 30-story high-rise. It was in downtown Tampa, and I was the engineer on site doing the caissons, inspecting the caissons. I think they were down 80 feet into a lime rock socket. So I was out there doing the caissons, and then I inspected all the rebar for all the footings, and then all the rebar for all the columns, and then all the post-tension slabs, and I'm measuring all the cables for that. So I was involved in that for like 2.5 years during construction, and like all sorts of different things happened during that project. Like we had bad concrete one day, and I mean, just all these different things. And it kind of puts you in your role as I don't know what state you practice in, but Florida has a unique inspection thing called the threshold inspections. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not.
So in Florida, there's what they call the threshold law, and certain buildings are deemed threshold buildings. So if it occupies over 500 people, if it's over 50 feet in height, it requires special independent inspection, like for everything. So like all the footings from the soils reports, everything needs to be checked on that building separately. And it's a separate engineering license that's only available in Florida. It's called a special inspector's license.
I have never heard of that before.
In conjunction with the structural engineer of record, the threshold inspector also has to review the inspection reports and sign off on the building. Without the threshold inspector, they can't get a CO. So,
I had no idea that was going on. I wonder what other states might have that.
California,
it seems like it's related to the category of the building.
Yeah, it's really, once you get into I think when we're doing like here, where we're doing seismic classes of buildings, certain buildings are certain seismic classes because like it's a healthcare building, it's a school, it's for public, or it's a high rise that's going to house a certain amount of people. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
So every state is different, and honestly, I'm still learning every day, like the different requirements with different states.
Well, I think every engineer is still learning. Once you think you know it all, you don't. So, that's just the nature of it. There's so much to know. Well, that's pretty cool. You got a lot of cool experience. I want to jump into kind of a quick question round with you. Maybe you can answer these as long or as short as you want. But You already talked about this, about an obstacle that you faced becoming a civil engineer.
Hmm.
Would you rate that getting that PE license was high on that list for you, or is there another obstacle? Was school hard, or
No, I
what?
think getting the PE license was very challenging. It was very challenging. Just having to wait the extra 4 years, to get
Yeah,
it, that made it really challenging. I think, and it's definitely rewarding. So I know there's some engineers that think it might not be worth it to get the PE license, but it definitely is.
yeah. I mean, well, Civil Engineering Academy is basically built to help people get their licenses and
Hmm.
help you become a professional engineer. So, yeah. And you took a course from us, right, Kurt?
Yeah, I took a course when I was taking my license, getting prepared for it. Because it had been 10 years since I've been out of school, so I
Cool.
needed some
A
definite
little boost.
refresher. Yeah, definite refresher.
Well, that's awesome. If anybody needs that course, you can go check it out. We created it. It's called the Ultimate Civil PE Review Course, and that's the website for that is civilpereviewcourse.com. Go check that out. How about this? What's the best advice you've ever received, or just good advice in general?
Well, I mean, I've over the years I've worked with several different engineers and several different advice, but I mean the two biggest things, as I said earlier, was you have to know to communicate, and you have to know what your objectives are.
Yep.
So, like when you're
Perfect.
looking at the project, figure out what your objectives are. If you don't know, you need to talk to somebody else, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I mean, you don't know everything,
Yes.
um, so don't be afraid to reach out to somebody else. I'm everybody works in companies. I'm sure they have a chief engineer or somebody who like has more experience than you, and they should be able to answer that stuff really quickly.
For
Because
sure.
there's no way to know everything without gaining the experience.
Yeah. Good points. How about this? Who's someone you look up to and why?
Hmm. That's a hard question. I don't know. Honestly, I think, and this might sound a little odd. Like recently, it's been Elon Musk.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like I think he is probably I don't know if he's an engineer by training, but I think he's the ultimate problem solver. Like I think he's the type of person that sits down and looks at what problems are and how he could provide solutions. I mean, it might not always be the greatest idea in the world, but I think he's definitely making headway. Like I don't know if you heard of the Boring Company.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like he built a tunnel in LA where you could drive underground. Like
I didn't know he already built it.
yeah, he has a
I'm,
test tunnel already
oh,
completed. So
I'm
I
behind the
mean,
times here. I think he's
so
a
he's
great
def
example. I think he's definitely a problem solver. I love hearing about what he's doing and what he's working on and all the stuff he's doing. It boggles my mind everything he's involved with. It's awesome too. So
yeah.
I think he's got resources to do it. He's got a mind that works that way, and he's fun to learn about. So good one. How about this? What's a good resource that you would recommend for the Civil Engineering Academy community, and maybe why you think it's a good one?
Honestly, I've been using, and there's this website called Scribed,
Mm-hmm.
and on Scribed you could get like all these ebooks and stuff like that, but also people could upload like documents and different like books and stuff like that. And it's been a huge resource, like
Yeah,
different
that's
engineers
funny
from
you
all over
mentioned
the
that.
world.
Yeah, I use that myself. In fact, I use it to listen to books
Hmm.
as well. Um, there's a book I'm actually listening to right now. It's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss,
Hmm.
and that's on Scribed as well. But it talks about negotiating, and this guy was like a hostage negotiator, and so
Oh, I
he,
think I heard of that. Yeah.
yeah, it's a fascinating book to learn some of the tips he has in there for negotiating. So, Scribed is a great resource. Um, I just talked about a book, but do you have any books you recommend for any engineer or the community?
One of the books that there's an author that I really like. He wrote a couple different books, and a lot of them are human natures. You've heard of Robert Greene?
I have, but I'm not familiar with his books.
So he has one called the 48 Laws of Power.
Okay.
And some of them are a little bit outlandish and might seem weird, but like I've listened to his book several times, The 48 Laws of Power. He also has one on mastery and one on human nature.
Wow.
And it kind of is he does this thing where you analyze people's behavior and kind of try to figure out the way they're thinking, and it's very useful in business, especially in like the marketing world, trying to get projects or even
Sure.
trying to get competitively ahead. I mean, the 40 Laws of Power or some, I think a lot of rappers like to reference it, but like I think it has applications across the board. Like,
Okay. Well, I'm going to link that. We'll put it in some show notes to make sure people know about it. Go check that out. 48 Laws of Power. This is a fun question I like to ask people, but if you had all the knowledge and resources in the world, what's something you'd like to be part of in the civil engineering world or in anything really?
I think high speed rail. I mean, I think this country is begging for a high speed rail system. There should be a train that runs beside I-10 from the East Coast to here.
That would be awesome.
And that would be amazing. Like you could just hop on that train in like Jacksonville and get off in San Francisco. And
Yes.
a bullet train that goes like 400 miles an hour. I'd love to be. I remember, I think there was supposed to be high speed rail in Florida, but when I was there, and we were involved a little bit in initial borings. But the track was supposed to run along I-4, one of the tracks, and I guess the project got shelved because of funding or whatever.
Dang it.
Definitely high-speed rail.
Well, let's get Elon Musk on that so we can get this thing built. I would love that. I would love that. Well, I think you've shared a lot of tips with us today. I know I've learned a lot. Is there any last piece of guidance or a best way if somebody wanted to communicate with you to get a hold of you if they had any questions, maybe even about becoming a geotech engineer, because that's kind of where you're at?
Yeah, like so I I'm on I have my email on Gmail, or I'm on Instagram as well and Facebook. So
Or LinkedIn.
I mean I'm on LinkedIn as well, yeah.
Check out Kurt Brown. Go find him.
So you could reach out to me there. And I mean, I'm more than willing to help anybody. I mean, I know how I felt growing up when I was a young engineer, and I still consider myself a young engineer. So.
Yeah. Well, you got guys in school, and I'm sure they're looking for mentors too. So if you have any advice, take Kurt's offer and reach out to him especially if you're looking to go into the geotech arena. I think you bring a lot of experience already. You've worked on some big projects, and all of that is very, I think, important to people. So I think that's great. Well, Kurt, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And
Pleasure was mine.
Yeah, that was really great. We'll talk to you later.
All right, sounds good.
All right, see ya.
All right, bye.